The Avengers roster is only going to get bigger now that the multiverse and the cosmos are all fair game, and that's great news for us fans. But just which new heroes that we've met so far would make the best fit on the Avengers squad rather than flying solo? And which heroes haven't we met could make a huge entrance in Phase 4 and earn their place on Earth's Mightiest Heroes? Well, that's what I want to discuss today. Let's get started right now. I'm going to start off with some heroes who we already met in Phase 4 but haven't officially joined the Avengers team yet, but are on their way to becoming full-fledged members. So with that in mind, of course I gotta start with Shang-Chi. With a wonderful origin story that ended with the martial artist becoming the proud owner of a set of powerful rings with unknown origin, I think it's safe to say that Shang-Chi will have a huge role in whatever future version of the Avengers we see next. You know, I guess technically Katie got an invitation too, even though she just learned how to use a bow like a week earlier. Hey, maybe they're just in desperate need of a new archer. Could Loki end his final arc in the MCU as a full-fledged Avenger? That would certainly be a fun piece of symmetry. He started the franchise as the one who forced the Avengers to assemble in the first place, and then was utterly destroyed by them. But now that he's on this I'm a good guy in a tie now kick trying to save the multiverse, I think it's only a matter of time before he joins up officially with the Avengers to protect the entire universe. Could you imagine the snarky Asgardian's feelings after realizing he has to become an official Avengers member? He'd probably hate it, but I think the delight we'd feel as an audience is enough to overpower that. Right now, Yelena is working for Valentina Allegra de Fontaine and is seemingly on a quest to eliminate Hawkeye as revenge for what happened to Natasha. But we all know that things won't stay this way. After the two get this misunderstanding sorted, will Yelena just go back to being a hired gun? Or will she actually follow in her sister's footsteps to become the Black Widow of the Avengers team? I hope for the latter one because given her attitude and general demeanor, I'd love to see how she interacts with a big group. Hey, every Avengers team needs a good spy who knows how to be stealthy, right? The Fantastic Four is Marvel's most important family, and some of the biggest comic storylines involving world-ending threats usually involve the Fantastic Four in some way. We know they're on their way as Spider-Man director John Watts has been tapped to direct the MCU's version of Fantastic Four, but the big question isn't who is going to play these characters, but rather how these characters are going to fit into the established MCU. They presumably have to come from a different universe at this point, and if that's the case, then will they want Avengers membership right away? Or do you think they'll want to operate on their own for a bit before a big team up? I mean, they have their hands full already that they don't exactly need the Avengers. Everyone was surprised when, in what feels like 9 years ago at this point, Kevin Feige announced Academy Award winner Mahershala Ali was playing Blade in the MCU. Now, we don't exactly know what Blade's deal will be in the MCU, but it looks like he's going to have ties with another character who I'll mention next. Blade only joined the Avengers in the comics relatively recently when vampires started to become a problem in the world. Are we going to see something similar happen? Are vampires going to start overrunning everything, forcing the Avengers to turn to the one man who probably knows more about the creatures than anyone? Yeah, maybe Blade can join right after a fight with the Sonyverse's Morbius. Amidst all the Eternals drama, another supporting character got a bit of an origin story. Kit Harington's Dane Whitman popped up for just long enough for audiences to get a general gist of where he was heading. His family history is complicated, his uncle's a mysterious dude, and now he has in his possession a sinister artifact. Comic fans know this as the Ebony Blade, and it grants Dane the ability to become the Black Knight. With Blade's voice popping up at the end of Eternals, you know bigger things are planned for Dane, and having him eventually join the Avengers would be a cool way to add some medieval flair to the group. Or will he and Blade team up to form their own team? Only time will tell. One of the most hotly anticipated characters coming down the pipeline is Moon Knight, played by Oscar Isaac. Moon Knight is definitely one of the most quirky Avengers in the MCU, and I'm sure whatever adventure he ends up going on will be full of mayhem and mischief. But the big question is, will he eventually join the Avengers? Honestly, he's a tough sell. Not because he lacks talent, but because he's such an offbeat hero that I don't know how he would vibe with Earth's Mightiest Heroes. Maybe it'll be a package deal. Maybe Moon Knight, Blade, and the Black Knight could all team up and then join the Avengers, sort of in the same way the Guardians of the Galaxy did in Infinity War and Endgame. The mutants are coming. With the inevitability of the X-Men arriving in the MCU, presumably from a different universe, there's probably going to be an initial clash between the Avengers and Professor X's team. But after everyone walks away as friends, could we see everyone's favorite Canadian cigar-chomping, adamantium-infused mutant join the Avengers? I think Wolverine would be the perfect character to both be a part of the X-Men as well as an official member of the Avengers team. It allows him to be a liaison between the two sides to make sure there are no misunderstandings or miscommunications. Plus, seeing him on the same side as the Hulk in some capacity would just be a delight for fans everywhere. The post-credit scene for Eternals introduced a surprising new character, Thanos' brother, Starfox. Now, in the comics, Starfox is problematic in a lot of ways, and although he's lived a lifestyle where he likes to just relax, party, and seduce women, he has joined the Avengers from time to fulfill that heroic itch. Is this where the character's introduction in Eternals leads? Like, how ironic would it be if after the Avengers had to assemble to stop the biggest threat the universe had ever seen in Thanos, a little while later, Thanos' brother Eros, aka Starfox, joins the Avengers to help fight evil. Sure, it probably would have been better to have him for the Infinity War or Endgame battle, but he was probably busy partying it up on some alien planet or something. The superhero Nova hasn't been exactly teased yet, but it's surprising we've gotten no mention of him. The first Guardians of the Galaxy introduced the Nova Corps, but then the Corps were destroyed off-screen in Infinity War. That actually does lead the way for Nova to show up in full force. Say there were a few survivors of the Nova Corps, and in order to make sure they're never attacked like this again, they infuse one of the remaining members with the Nova Force in order to be their champion. This is a way to get Nova into the MCU, and maybe after teaming up with Captain Marvel or something, he could join the inevitable Space Avengers. Sentry is one of the strongest heroes in the Marvel Universe. I mean, he's been described as having the strength of 1,000,000 exploding suns. Of course he's powerful. He also has one of the most unique comic histories out of any hero, as he lives with the fact that as long as he's around, his evil alter ego known as the Void will also continue to grow more powerful. Now that the Hulk seems permanently hurt and Thor and Captain Marvel are off on their own space adventures, the Avengers will need a heavy hitter on their team who likes to stay on Earth. Sentry is perfect for that, and he could be one of the most valuable assets for the Avengers. I mentioned the Hulk being sidelined, so how about a new Hulk steps up? We know She-Hulk is getting her own Disney Plus show, and it will focus more on the lawyerly side of things rather than a straight-up superhero fight show. But will that segue into Jennifer Walters joining the Avengers? Like, yes, she's super strong, and you don't want to mess with her, but also, I think it's about time the Avengers had a good lawyer on their side. The heroes tend to get into a lot of messy situations from a legal standpoint, so it might help to have a practicing lawyer on their payroll. Ghost Rider is a fantastic character who deserves more time to shine in the MCU. Yes, the Robbie Reyes version had a memorable arc on the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. TV show, but that seems to have been written out of the official MCU canon. Ghost Rider's powers and skills would make him a unique asset on the Avengers team, and the superheroes would have to decide if they could let someone as uncontrollable and frankly a little scary looking as Ghost Rider into their Avengers club. Come on, tell me you wouldn't want to see Ant-Man sitting next to Ghost Rider at the Avengers monthly meetup. That's comedy gold, I tell you. If Deadpool ever makes it over to the MCU, you just know the first thing he'd do is try to become a full-fledged Avenger. He would know that being an Avenger is where the real money is and work hard to be noticed by people like the new Captain America in order to get a spot on the team. The problem with Deadpool on the Avengers is that he might be a little too zany and off the wall for people to take him seriously. Like, he'd be talking to Bruce Banner and then Bruce would have to watch him turn to no one and start talking to a pretend audience. We've already seen the X-Men avoid Deadpool, so why wouldn't the Avengers do the same? I can imagine a scenario where Deadpool slowly sneaks around and tries to appear in the background of Avengers missions in order to boost his credibility. It's heavily hinted that Namor will be the main villain of the upcoming Black Panther 2, which is interesting because Namor is a character who's been both a good and bad guy in the past. If he is indeed the villain of Black Panther 2, will he have a shot of redemption later on? Like, will he eventually get to a place where he is a valuable member of the new Avengers lineup? I could see a situation where he's mad at Black Panther, Wakanda, and the whole world, but decides the best way to implement the changes he wants is by actively contributing to world events and fighting alongside the Avengers in order to get things done. Plus, the Avengers need a water guy. WandaVision ended with Monica Rambeau getting unique powers and becoming a superhero in her own way. In the comics, she's had a bunch of monikers like Spectrum, Photon, and even was Captain Marvel for a while. What if the OG Captain Marvel continues to be too busy dealing with cosmic threats to spend a lot of time on Earth, and therefore Spectrum sorta takes her place on the Earthbound Avengers team in order to keep the planet safe? That would be a cool way to connect the Earth Avengers with the ever-growing Space Avengers, as the bonds between Spectrum and Captain Marvel can continue to be explored. Look, who knows what's happening with Peter Parker's Spider-Man right now? We know Sony and Disney have a complicated relationship, and the future of the webhead is still up in the air. What if the MCU needs to write Peter Parker out, but still wants to use a spider character in live action? Well, that's where Miles Morales comes in. We already know Miles exists in the MCU, and if No Way Home ends with Peter out of this universe and exploring the multiverse, the Avengers can just call on another Spider-Man in order to fill that void. It allows for Sony and Disney to be happy, as well as keep a version of Spider-Man around in the MCU. Everyone wins. Another hero who's about to make a big impact on the MCU is Ms. Marvel. We already know that she's not only going to get her own Disney Plus TV show, but she's also set to co-star in the Captain Marvel sequel, which is now titled The Marvels. Her powers are unique enough where she's going to make an amazing hero, but the question is if she's just a little too young to join the Avengers properly. Like, Tony Stark isn't around anymore to randomly decide that teenagers should be Avengers anymore, so does Ms. Marvel have a chance? I think it's possible given her skills, but also she could very likely be a member of the Young Avengers, which would be a subset of the Avengers and still counts for this list. While Venom is on his own multiverse adventure of some sort, there's still a way to get the Venom symbiote onto the MCU's Avengers team, and that's through Agent Venom. Agent Venom is Flash Thompson in the comics, who becomes a top soldier for the government after absorbing the Venom symbiote. I think it would just be fascinating to see the MCU's version of Flash Thompson become Agent Venom. From everything we've seen so far, this Flash isn't as tough as previous versions, but he also has a deeply traumatic backstory that deserves to be explored more. Merging him with some version of the Venom symbiote would force him to step up and be a true hero, especially if he wanted to be part of the Avengers one day. Fans are clamoring for Charlie Cox's Matt Murdock to return to the MCU after giving an amazing Daredevil performance in the Netflix era of shows that we don't talk about anymore. And the Devil of Hell's Kitchen would be the perfect street-level perspective that the Avengers probably need right now. A lot of Avengers are these larger-than-life superheroes dealing with huge universe-ending problems, but adding someone like Daredevil to the team would give them a different viewpoint of the world. Like in Spider-Man Homecoming, Adrian Toomes had been getting away with street-level crime for a while because the Avengers were too busy dealing with huge threats. So I think that's why a Daredevil addition, as well as any of the Defenders really, would be valuable. Because the multiverse is truly exploding, I think it's time to bring in Captain Britain. Not only is he a fun, awesome superhero in his own right, but he's usually part of the Captain Britain Corps, which is an interdimensional organization that basically ensures there's a Captain Britain in every universe. It would be a good anchor point to all the crazy multiverse shenanigans we're about to witness if we had a Captain Britain on the Avengers. The Hawkeye TV show is set to introduce Echo, a brilliant fighter who possesses photographic reflexes that allow her to copy fighting techniques she sees. It's rumored that Echo kicks so much butt in the Hawkeye show that she's going to get her own spin-off series. And why stop there? If she's that popular, she could see herself on the path to full-fledged Avengers membership. And while her fighting style would normally put her on the weaker end of the Avengers power level, let's not forget that Echo also becomes a host for the Phoenix Force, which is one of the most powerful forces in the entire universe. So yeah, better recruit her now. When Endgame skipped ahead 5 years, one of the major differences was when Scott Lang suddenly came back, he found his daughter was now 5 years older. That's tough for any parent, but good news for us, since it means Cassie Lang is now one step closer to becoming the superhero known as Stature. Like her father, she eventually uses Pym particles to become a hero that can both shrink and grow, so she can easily fill Ant-Man's shoes whenever Paul Rudd gets too old to play the part. But who am I kidding? Paul Rudd is ageless. Kate Bishop is getting the spotlight incredibly soon thanks to the Hawkeye TV show, and with all signs pointing to this being Hawkeye's swan song, does this mean that Kate will step up and take over the Hawkeye mantle? Hopefully. And while the Avengers always need someone like a Hawkeye to keep them grounded, perhaps Kate Bishop's Hawkeye would be better suited for the Young Avengers alongside heroes like Ms. Marvel and Stature. Now the question is Kate Bishop capable of leading the Young Avengers, or should she be a supporting character like Hawkeye was on the OG Avenger team? As I mentioned before, Thor is off doing his own space adventures for a bit, so that leaves the Earth Avengers without a true powerhouse. Well, that's where a Greek god like Hercules could come into play. Hercules actually has a long history in the MCU, and while the franchise hasn't introduced the other Greek gods, I think Hercules would be a solid first choice. Mainly because having Hercules on the Avengers team would hopefully dissuade Disney from making a live-action remake of the Hercules property. I'd rather see Hercules fighting Marvel villains than see that animated film remade into live action, wouldn't you agree? You think the Watcher ever wants to stop watching and be an Avenger for a bit? I mean, come on, he made himself a fancy superhero suit to fight Ultron. Of course he wants to be part of the team. Come on, Watcher, break your oath to not interfere for like the 14th time and come join in the fun.